Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today is Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be gathering around the virtual water cooler to talk about what we've been up to. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm an editor at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
All right, Brad, what have you been doing recently?
So I recently upgraded my workstation computer setup a little bit. I've been working with an old MacBook Air for years now, and while it's a testament to how good Apple computers are for how long I was able to use it and for it to not really slow down in a way that was frustratingly noticeable and for it to still work despite having a couple annoying bits of damage to it. Like, for example, the worst thing that happened was fairly recent. Like, in the past couple of years, my computer fell out of my bag and it landed right on the corner of the computer where the charging port is. And so it dented the frame around it, and I had to use pliers to bend the metal back so that I could actually plug it in. But it also smashed the metal connectors that allow electricity to flow through it. And so I could only position my charging cord in one very specific way for it to stay connected. And my battery charge was also super low. So it was just not it was a very difficult, sensitive situation. Like, if I wanted to work to travel and stuff like that, I had to really make sure I could be in a place where I could have my computer in a comfortable position. It was just getting really frustrating. And so I finally bit the bullet and got a newer MacBook Pro, and that's been working phenomenally. And because I have a newer MacBook Pro, I was also able to connect it to a couple external monitors. So now I have this super efficient 3-screen situation that is really helpful for all the clicking around I have to do to different windows, from Photoshop to podcasting to Slack and image searching and all the stuff that we have to do for work and everything. And on top of that, I also got myself a Bluetooth mouse, and I had to go out of my way to spend a little extra money than I would have preferred, but it's super helpful because one of the things that I find myself having to do a lot is side scrolling because of some of the different tools that we have to use, specifically Trello. If anybody knows about that work tool out there. And so I got a mouse that has how those mouses have the up and down scroll wheels on your fingertips? This one has one on the thumb for scrolling left to right, which is incredibly helpful for podcast editing, Trello, all that stuff. And so,
Oh, man.
Now that I have this situation, I feel like I'm a super efficient movie reporting robot.
That's awesome. Oh man, yeah, that's great. I used to try to have a multiple screen situation, and then I just got a really big curved extended monitor kind of thing. So now I just have a bunch of windows up in the same screen, but the screen is so big it takes up basically my whole desk. So I'm pretty much in the same type of position as you, and it's a real game changer having that much space. So that much room to work with. It's really awesome. Highly recommended if anybody has a desk job and works from home and is able to create a setup like that. It really changes the flow in a pretty great way.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get into what we've been reading, Brad. Are you familiar with Taschen, the book company, the publishing company?
Yeah, they make incredible books.
Yeah, so they sent me a copy of a new book called Life Hollywood for potential review, and I am happy to say that this 2-volume book is exactly what I hoped it would be. The book spans the years 1936 to 1972 in Hollywood, and it features some short essays about different aspects of film history. There's one about Cecil B. DeMille remaking the Ten Commandments. There's one about the African Queen. There's one about Alfred Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt. I mean, a ton of little short essays recounting what happened in those scenarios. But the big selling point of this thing are the photos. There are over 600 photos in here. A lot of them take up an entire page or a big 2-page spread, and more than half of them have never been seen before. And there are these absolutely gorgeous glamour shots of Marilyn Monroe and Grace Kelly and Elizabeth Taylor and all the classic Hollywood stars that you would expect to see in something like that. But there's also this real focus on the process of filmmaking and showing how things got made, which I always really appreciate. So Life magazine, all these photos came from Life magazine or their photographers, people that were under contract to them or independent contractors or whatever. And they talk a little bit about the history of the magazine in the book. and how the magazine at the time was all about kind of or a big goal of theirs, I guess, was trying to demystify the process of filmmaking and like make it seem like any other industry, like manufacturing or whatever other industries people were caring about in the middle of the century, because Hollywood is an industry, and sort of presenting it in those terms helped humanize the people behind the scenes and humanize the stars themselves. There's a lot of photos of the stars just like hanging out between takes and stuff like that. And so it like drove interest to all these movies that people were working on, while also, yeah, like showing people that, hey, there are all these technicians that come together to make movies. So it was very, very cool. I think this is like a top tier book. It's like a gorgeous coffee table type of thing. It's pretty expensive, as all Taschen books are. So I would say if money is no object, this would make an incredible gift for the movie lover in your life as we approach the holidays. It's called Life Hollywood by Taschen. What have you been reading recently, Brad?
Just a little thing. There's a new book about the art of Futurama, and it covers like the initial like I guess like 10 season run of the show. And so it digs back into like the show's history and shows early concept art and stuff like that. And I was surprised that they had actually never done a book like this before, because like when it was announced as a new release, I was like, have they really never done the art of Futurama before? And they hadn't. So it's not super in depth when it comes to behind the scenes details. It's kind of broken up into like 8 or 9 different sections where there's some gathered like comments from people like David X. Cohen and Matt Groening and some of the other producers and animators and some people in key roles and stuff like that that talk about just like general history of the show, and then like certain like key details about it and like development notes and stuff like that. But the collection of art is really fascinating to see just all the different iterations that certain characters went through. Like there were a lot of dramatically different looks for like Bender and for Fry, and just hearing like how all the ideas they had of trying to conceive like what the future would be like, and the struggle they had of like trying to make it happen when Fox didn't want them to use any of the animators from Simpsons or Family Guy or King of the Hill.
Hmm.
And so it's a little bit of a miracle that the show came together to be as good as it was, because it was such an uphill battle to even get it made the way that they wanted to. So yeah, so if you're a Futurama fan, it's definitely worth checking out and digging into, just for the art alone, and then yeah, some of the extra cool behind the scenes tidbits that they talk about throughout.
That's cool. I didn't realize that there was any animosity or whatever between the people who made the show and the studio in terms of like who they hired. I didn't realize Fox kind of put their foot down and said you can't have some of these people from our other animated projects.
Yeah, they didn't want to threaten the ones that were already like bringing in the money and super successful.
Yeah, I guess makes sense. Okay, so let's take a break and then we'll get back into what we've been watching. All right, Brad, you and I have seen at least 3 things that we're going to talk about here. I mean, we're going to talk about a lot more than that, but we have some crossover for 3 things. So let's talk about Conclave first. What did you think about this one?
Man, I love this movie so much. I was not expecting to love this movie so much. It felt like might be kind of stuffy, but it's like as gripping and thrilling as any like outstanding courtroom thriller. It's got like a bit of a petty gossipy side to it. Like you could call it 12 Angry Popes, or 12 Angry Cardinals rather, because like it focuses on the election of a new pope after the previous pope has died, and it goes through the voting process that they just repeat over and over again until they have a majority of people voting for who they think should be the new pope. And there's all of this behind the scenes gossip and betrayal and scheming, and like it's kind of the perfect movie for the time that we're in, dealing with the fallout of the 2024 election. And there's a lot of like similarities to just the politics of the times and what they talk about. And yeah, man, I love this movie so much. It was great.
I loved it as well. It's like some of my favorite character actors just absolutely cooking in close quarters, which I love to see. And
Yeah.
there's this big like struggle between tradition and progress, which, yeah, as you alluded to, a very relevant idea right now. I think this is some of Rafe Fiennes' best work. And I guess without spoiling anything, I'll just say the movie goes to some pretty unexpected places and makes some really interesting choices that provide uh, fascinating things to talk about. Let's put it that way. So,
Yeah,
yeah, this is still in theaters. So I think it sounds like both of us really encourage people to go seek this one out because it's a lot of fun at the movies.
yeah, 100%.
Okay, so we also watched My Old Ass, which I think as of now is streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Yes.
This is the movie that you might have seen the trailer for this. It's written and directed by Megan Park, and it is about a young woman who encounters an older version of herself played by Aubrey Plaza. And it's basically like a coming of age sort of romantic comedy, or romantic comedy makes it sound like it's formulaic, and in that genre it's more of a coming of age story, but it's romantic and it has comedic elements in it as well. And it also has this sort of like quasi sci-fi premise because of the Aubrey Plaza element. I really, really enjoyed this movie a lot. I think I was expecting Aubrey Plaza to be in it a lot more than she actually is. She's
Yeah.
only in it for like a couple scenes. And I thought that was kind of like the premise of the movie, but it really is this kind of more of like a coming of age story about this young woman who is about to go off to college, and it's about her relationship with her family and this romantic relationship that she gets involved in sort of the final days before she leaves and like moves on to a different phase in her life. And the older version of herself kind of gives her advice about how to navigate what's coming, and appreciate the familial relationships that she has more than, she's just kind of taking her family for granted and stuff like that. This movie is just a really, really I found it to be like a joyous movie to watch. It made me laugh a lot, and I got pretty emotional at certain points too. So I think it kind of like checked all the boxes for me. What did you think about My Old Ass?
Yeah, I like this a lot too. This is exactly the kind of movie that I'm a sucker for. Like coming of age movies just always hit me right in the sweet spot. And it also helps that Maisie Stella, who is the lead, she's just like mesmerizing to watch. She's funny, she's authentic. She hits the emotional beats, and yeah, I really like this movie a lot. I appreciated how simple the like you said, like vaguely sci-fi premise was, without them like feeling the need to explain, much about how it works or anything like that, and kind of giving into like a little bit of the magic, side that probably doesn't make sense if you think about it, but like that's not the important part of the movie, so it doesn't really matter. Kind of
Mhm.
similar to how like About Time just very briefly says, yeah, we can time travel and this is how it works, and you're like, all
Yeah.
right, we're in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I completely agree about Maisie Stella. This is apparently her film debut, which is kind of astonishing because it's a great
Wow, is it
performance.
really?
And yeah, that's what Wikipedia says. And I have not done a deep dive into her IMDb or anything, but yeah, just a really, really like confident, assured, great performance right out of the gate from her. So I'm excited to see what she does in the years ahead. So it's called My Old Ass. It's streaming on Amazon Prime Video right now. And then the third piece of crossover we have is a documentary that's streaming on Disney Plus called Music by John Williams, which is pretty self-evident from its title. But what'd you make of this one?
I really like this a lot. If I have one major complaint, it's that I could have watched a 6-hour docu series where they just did this the entire time.
Hmm.
Because I would have really enjoyed hearing him dig into a bunch of the movies that they didn't get a chance to talk about. I mean, his work with Spielberg alone demands just its own docu series, But like for a documentary that is just about a man who has had such an incredible influence on the music of cinema and has had such a unbelievable career. It captures the man and the work and like the stuff that he's best known for, and talking to the people who have worked with him very frequently about just who he is and how he collaborates with them. And so if you love John Williams, if you love the scores of movies, like you'll be enthralled and fully engaged by this documentary.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a little surface level. It doesn't really get much into it. It talks about his home life a little bit, but he's such a workaholic that I'm not sure if there is like a true warts and all type of story. I was kind of hoping this might get a little dirtier, grimier than it actually gets, but this is basically just like a feature length featurette or something, which sounds like insulting or whatever, but it's actually just really enjoyable to watch when his music is so great and he is so charming and entertaining as a person to watch. So, anybody hoping for like a pull back the curtain, show me the dark side of John Williams kind of thing. This is not that at all. It's very like nice and rosy, and it shows some, like I said, some stuff with his family life and his relationship with his kids that maybe was a little bit fraught back in the day, but seems to be better now and all of that. But yeah, I totally agree. Like I know you and I love the movie Hook, which is we're kind of on an island on that one.
That was the big one that I was like, oh, I want to hear him talk about Hook.
I know, and one of the songs from that film plays right when the end credits of the movie start.
Yeah, I was like, you didn't even talk about this song. What are you doing?
It kind of felt like the director was also a fan of Hook, but knew that there wasn't enough room in the doc to do that. So like that was his way of being like, all right, Hook fans, I'll give you a little bit, that's how I read that. But yeah, I was disappointed that there wasn't a little bit more there. But again, like the breadth of his career is so expansive that there's just no way you could talk about every single movie. So music by John Williams, streaming on Disney Plus right now, highly recommended. I saw a movie called Flow. Have you ever heard of this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. And I want to see it because I've heard that it's very good.
Yeah, so it's the Latvian submission for Best International Feature at the upcoming Oscar ceremony. There are no humans in this movie. It's an animated film about a black cat who lives in a world where there seems to be regular flooding. And this cat has to band together with a ragtag group of other animals in order to survive. And there's no dialogue in the movie. And it's very naturalistic in terms of like how the animals move. I think they do a really great job on that front, the way that these creatures move and react to their environments and stuff like that. They seem very true to life. But the animation style kind of looks like something from PlayStation 3. It's not the cleanest, most modern approach, which is a little distracting at first, but I got used to it pretty quickly. And ultimately, I think it works pretty well. And I think importantly, the message of the movie, which is about forming communities with folks that you might not have otherwise chosen in order to kind of survive a destructive onslaught, once again feels particularly timely right now. So I think Flow is still in some theaters and it should be coming to VOD soon. So keep an eye out for that. Could be like a sneaky contender at the Oscars for Best Animated Feature or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see it get a nomination in that category. And the last thing that I watched, Brad, is a documentary called Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve story. Remind me, have you seen this yet?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters, actually.
Okay, yeah. This is just like, I was weeping. I saw a screener of it at my house. I watched it before work one day earlier this week, and I was just like crying in my room by myself watching this. It's just, it's kind of exactly what you think it's going to be. And if you have never heard the story of what happened to Christopher Reeve, this is going to be a really great sort of comprehensive look at that. And I think even somebody like myself who was familiar with what happened to him and had kind of ingested some other documentaries and different media about that event, there were plenty of things in here that I didn't know about as well, including maybe most prominently Christopher Reeve's friendship with Robin Williams, which is kind of front and center in this documentary, and is just a really sort of heartwarming showcase of what true friendship looks like. And so, yeah, I think this is a really, really moving, really great movie that also focuses on Christopher Reeve's family. A lot of it is about there's a lot of like talking head interviews with his kids, and his wife Dana Reeve is a major figure in the film as well, and I didn't know much about her story. So
I also appreciated that it dug into some of his flaws too. Like,
yes.
it wasn't just painting him as like, oh, he's Superman and he's a hero, he did all these great things, because he did do great things, but he also made mistakes along the way, and it didn't hesitate to point out, especially when it came to like his actions as far as like pushing for rights for disabled people and things like that. Like, there were some missteps he made, there were some controversial things that happened, and they didn't shy away from that and make it seem like he always knew what he was doing and always did the best thing.
Yes, I'm very glad that you said that, because like the kind of approach that I was maybe hoping for with the John Williams doc, I feel like is actually that approach was utilized in this Christopher Reeve doc. So I think it's I want to say it was co-financed by CNN Films and HBO documentaries. So I imagine it's going to be available to watch at some point, like on Max or something in
Yeah.
the coming months.
I
But
think
as of right
I
now,
think it's available right now to rent and or buy digitally.
okay,
But yeah, I'm pretty sure it'll end up streaming like on Max because it's one of those CNN docs.
okay. So it's called Super Slash Man: The Christopher Reeve Story. What have you been watching, Brad?
So I went to the theater to see Robert Zemeckis's Here, and it's such a frustrating movie. We did obviously me and Chris Evangelista did a whole ranking of Robert Zemeckis movies. Let me just say this one would not rank very high. Um, Conceptual, and it's not even that it's like a bad movie necessarily. It's just too simple for doing something that is at the same time both ambitious and limiting in how you tell a story through film. Because conceptually, the idea of telling a story that spans, centuries from the dawn of, of time essentially to, a family living in the 70s or 80s and even into the 2020s, telling that story by having a stationary camera in the exact same spot the entire time and showing all these different time periods and moments throughout the history of this one spot, on the planet sounds compelling and ambitious, but it's also severely limiting in how you tell the story and how much of the story you can tell. And unfortunately, the way they tell the story isn't done in a way that feels innovative beyond that. And the story about the family itself is something that you've seen dozens of times in a bunch of other weepy family dramas. There are some interesting asides, but they don't ever feel like it coalesces into a thing where there's like a unifying theme. Like it feels like it's just doing these little side things as like a way of, just playing with the format that they're of having this singular shot spread across different times. And surprisingly too, I was anticipating that the transition between time periods would be a lot more smooth and they might find a cool way to do it, but it's so clumsy. Like it and this is based on a graphic novel, and so I think that's why they did it this way. But they basically use like what are essentially comic panels that like will show up every now and then in the middle of a scene, focus on a certain item, and it shows you that is now in a different area of time, and then eventually the scene will change around it, but not in a smooth way, in a very clumsy, just fade or dissolve kind of way. And I was just
Hmm.
like, what are we doing here? Why could we not do this in a cool way? Especially since everybody looks like they're on a green screen set almost all the time in this movie.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating because I feel like there could have been a way to do this well, and like I just don't know if Zemeckis couldn't crack it or he felt like he did or what, but it was extremely frustrating.
Yeah, it's a pretty frustrating movie. Chris and I did a big spoiler discussion about it. I guess it was last Friday, and so I encourage people to listen to that if you haven't yet. If you want to hear people dig more into the details of the movie, but yeah, I'm sorry that you didn't like it as much, Brad. I know a lot of people seem to have like genuine emotional responses to this movie where it like really got to them in a way, and there are moments where it got to me, but I think overall I was just kind of so put off by the execution of this idea that
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to be thinking about this one for very much longer.
Yeah, and I can understand it too, because like I would see it with my mom and one of her friends, and because they're older, like it resonates with them on that level, and um, it's a little bit easier to tug at their heartstrings in that way, especially when it's about like the passage of time and that kind of thing. But for me, there's like just so many other movies that do that kind of thing better. Like I talked about time earlier. That's a prime example, I think, of me that does something very similar with like a family dynamic and time itself, without doing it in a way that feels overwhelming or lost in its own conceptual framework.
Hmm. Yeah, there are so many like baffling choices about here, and I think Chris and I said it where it's just like it's a movie that you can talk about a lot because you're just like, what is going on? What was
Yeah,
the idea behind this? It's like kind of fun to analyze, but not as fun to watch.
the whole lazy boy aside thing, I was like,
Yes.
it's like that's an interesting like story thread to follow, but like it doesn't tie in to anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. My understanding is that was invented specifically for this movie too. So I would maybe forgive it a little bit more if that was like taken directly from the graphic novel and you're kind of like, "Oh, okay, well, that was an adaptation choice." But this is like you put that in on top of the rest of it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
anyway. Fascinating stuff. Pretty big misfire, I think, for Robert Zemeckis with Here. What else have you been watching, Brad?
I also watched Gladiator 2, and I'll keep this brief just because I'm pretty sure we'll probably have a big spoiler episode for Gladiator 2 once it comes out here in a couple weeks or so.
Yep.
So for now, I will just say for a sequel that nobody asked for, I think it's mostly pretty dang good. Paul Mescal is not necessarily as engaging as Russell Crowe was in the original, but he's a solid choice. Denzel Washington is the one who I think really elevates this movie, as he does pretty much everything that he works on. And the movie itself is more of a remake slash Lego sequel than you might be expecting, or maybe if you are expecting that, then it'll be right up your alley. Until it gets to like the latter half where it kind of starts to feel fresh and it takes a different approach and changes things up a bit. But it has great action set pieces. Every performance in it is really good. And so yeah, it's not going to measure up, I think, to the original Gladiator for most people, but it doesn't really feel like we get a lot of these, sword and sandal movies on this scale anymore, and it's beautiful to look at, and it's still great work from Ridley Scott. So yeah, it's worth seeing, but like I would just say maybe temper your expectations a little bit.
Okay, I appreciate the heads up. I look forward to seeing this one soon. What else have you been checking out?
I also saw Heretic, which is the new horror movie starring Hugh Grant as a man who takes in a couple of female Mormon missionaries and essentially traps them and engages in a menacing religious conversation, debate, what have you, with them. And man, this movie is so good and so much fun, and Hugh Grant is incredible in it. I hope he keeps taking like weird roles like this and like starts to do just the strangest stuff in this back half of his career, because yeah, he has just this great way of speaking in a way that is threatening while also still being kind of charming, and just very matter of fact and polite, but also like you can see like just the wheel spinning in his head, and just like the threat that's coming from his eyes. He's just so good in this movie. But yeah, and the best thing about it too is like it's not the kind of thing where like they're poking fun at like Mormons specifically or anything like that. It really is more of just like a pushback on religion as a whole, and it's just it seems like they use Mormons in the movie because it's the easiest religion to get into the door, because they actively have missionaries who do this all the time, and so
Hmm.
that's just the easiest way to set up those characters as victims. But it's very much just more about religion in general, and not super specifically about Mormonism. But yeah, I liked it a lot, and that's in theaters right now, so I couldn't recommend it more.
Yeah, I think it performed pretty well in its opening weekend, which hopefully will be encouraging to Hugh Grant to continue, like you said, to take more challenging roles and things that might be a little outside of the box, because it seems like audiences are digging this one in a big way. So I'm excited about that. What else have you been watching?
I also finally got around to seeing I Saw the TV Glow, which is available to stream on Max right now. It's an A24 movie, and this one's on the weirder side. It's a little bit more abstract and requires some patience, and it's a bit of a peculiar slow burn that doesn't necessarily like explain everything to understand. Like you might leave the ending feeling a little frustrated and wondering what it's about, but I think that this movie has a lot of interesting things to say that are kind of intentionally open to interpretation, while also still having a very obvious, approach to what it's about as well. Because there's on a larger, more general scale, it's kind of like about just denying your own identity and who you are, and living vicariously through the media that you consume. But then it also feels like it's a little bit of like a criticism on being lost in nostalgia and stuff like that. And the filmmaker has said that it's very much a trans narrative, which also does come through as well. But I think that there's something about it that also feels very universal, regardless of whether you are a trans person, or know a trans person or something like that. And so yeah, it's I was really fascinated and just enthralled by this movie, and I think that it has a lot of different things to say that resonate on a variety of levels. And so it's definitely not for everybody. It'll probably weird some people out and frustrate some people, but I was very much absorbed by it.
Yeah, lots to chew on in that one. Just a movie that I still think about. There are just images that kind of pop into my mind, and the color palette and the neon pinks and all of that, just like
Yeah.
very distinctive. You just don't really see movies like this in mainstream America anyway. So I appreciate it on that level, if for no other reason. So yeah, good stuff there. What's the last thing you wanted to talk about?
The last thing I want to talk about is a movie called I Like Movies. This is a Canadian movie that jumped around different festivals in like 2022 and 2023. It's directed by a woman named Chandler Levac, and it's very much like a Clerks meets Ladybird situation, but it's about this
Hmm.
17-year-old boy played wonderfully by this young upcoming actor Isaiah Lettinen, who is he's this kind of like socially inept but very articulate and smart movie obsessed 17-year-old. He's just very very talkative, and but like he can be a little bit off putting because his movie obsession is to the point where like it dominates his entire personality, and it kind of makes him a little bit insufferable at times, and I can relate.
I wouldn't know anything at all about that.
But no, I very much saw like a lot of myself and warts and all from when I was a teenager and into college and stuff like that. It's a little bit more extreme, here. I wasn't quite as insufferable as this kid can be, but the actor playing him is so good that like even though he is clearly like making poor decisions and very off-putting in like the way he speaks and like treats people because he has a very specific perspective on things and like a very focused drive, he still is a charming kid. Like you can see that there's like something in there about him that like you kind of can't help but love despite all of his flaws. So yeah, it's one of those this is like a coming of age movie, very much like hits in my wheelhouse. It has a really solid heart to it, a good emotional core. And yeah, it's just wonderful, and it had taken a while for it to finally get around because I'd seen some other colleagues online and stuff talking about it, and it's finally available to stream for free on Hoopla. So if you have access to Hoopla, which you can get through a myriad of libraries, then you can watch it there.
Okay, so the movie is called I Like Movies.
Yes.
Check that one out. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is the What We've Been Eating section, which is always fun. So, what have you been eating recently?
All right, so it's the holiday season, so hoop de hoop and dipple de dop and all that jazz. And so Little Debbie, they always bring out their Christmas snacks. Do you like Little Debbie's Christmas snacks, Ben?
I do. I like they're basically like zebra cakes, but Christmas tree shaped.
Yes, and they're delicious. And this year they decided to take that Christmas tree cake formula and apply it to their mini donuts. They did this before. I think it was earlier this year. They had zebra cake donuts where it's like little mini donuts and the frosting is the white frosting with the chocolate stripes. This is the same thing where it's white frosting, red stripes, a little bit of green sprinkles on it. And they're not quite as good as the Christmas tree cakes because the Christmas tree cakes are softer and creamier, but the frosting on the donuts is still pretty good, and they're festive. Just a nice color scheme to have if you're enjoying a good breakfast with Christmas tree cake donuts. So yeah, so those are out in stores right now.
Okay, so what other donuts did you try?
So this is kind of misleading because the product is called Pillsbury Toaster Donuts, but they're not actually donuts. The flavor profiles are inspired by donuts, though. So these are basically Pillsbury toaster strudels, but they come in glazed donut, Boston cream, and I forget what the flavor is, but it's designed to look like your standard pink sprinkled donut. Pink frosted sprinkle donut. And so they have three different
Okay.
flavors. And so the one I got was the Boston cream pie one or just Boston cream donut one, because I love a good Boston cream donut. And actually at one point, Pillsbury Toaster Strudel did have a Boston cream variant. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is basically just that. And it is. It comes with chocolate frosting. It has delicious cream filling. So if you like toaster strudels, I would recommend trying at the very least that one. I don't know if the other two are good. I probably won't try those, but I definitely was a big fan of the Boston Cream Pillsbury toaster donuts. So
We've probably talked about this before. Are you a toaster strudel person over a Pop-Tart person?
I don't know if I would say over a Pop Tart. I like them both for different ways, and it just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Because I like the flaky exterior of a toaster strudel and the frosting on top of it. But sometimes you just can't go wrong with a classic frosted strawberry Pop Tart or a s'mores Pop Tart. And especially since Pop Tart has been doing tons of like new flavors over the years, like I always am interested in trying new Pop Tart flavors. So yeah,
Mhm.
I like both for different reasons.
Okay. All right. So you got a couple more things to talk about here.
Yeah. Also for the holiday season, M&M's has a new Toasty holiday peanut variant, and they're not remarkably different from the regular peanut M&Ms. They just have a vaguely like toasty peanut flavor to them, as if like you roasted peanuts over a fire for Christmas. And so they're good. Like if you like peanut M&Ms, you'll probably still enjoy these. They're not remarkably different. It's just a slight holiday variation because everyone likes roasting nuts on an open fire.
So you could taste the difference in a taste test probably if the two were right next to each other, but it's not like that dramatic of a difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. So toasty holiday peanut M&Ms sounds like
Yeah.
that's quite something. What's next?
So this is the last one, and it'll sound like a weird one, and some people will be like, "Oh, what the fuck's wrong with you?" Which fair. But DiGiorno has a Thanksgiving pizza that is out now exclusively at Kroger and its sister stores. There are a bunch of stores that fall under the Kroger banner. How does that sound, Ben?
Well, if you're talking about like Thanksgiving dinner on a pizza, which I have to assume that's what this means, then that
Yes.
sounds atrocious. So, yeah, Are you going to tell me that it's good? Please don't tell me that it's good.
No, it's not great, but it is decent because have you ever had a Thanksgiving sandwich?
um, I don't think so. What is that exactly?
So a Thanksgiving sandwich is basically where you take a good chunk of like what is Thanksgiving dinner. You take turkey, you take gravy, you take stuffing, you take cranberry sauce, and you put it on a sandwich. And initially, I thought that's probably not that great, but I had one at one point, and holy crap, the combination of flavors is surprisingly fantastic. The sweetness mixes with the savory, as far as like the cranberry and the gravy, and like the meat is delicious along with it. The stuffing adds a little bit just extra layer of softness in the middle, and it really is good. And it's Thanksgiving sandwiches are actually a big staple overseas in Europe for the holiday season. Like all of their usual fast food spots usually have some kind of Thanksgiving sandwich scenario that they have where it has all of those things on it. And so this pizza is basically that with a little bit of extra, because this Thanksgiving pizza, it comes on a Detroit style crust. It has turkey, gravy, small diced sweet potatoes, green beans, cranberries, two kinds of cheese, and crispy onions. So it has a little bit of extra because there's usually not green beans or sweet potatoes on a normal Thanksgiving sandwich or the crispy onions. But I didn't love this, but I thought it was decent because the choice to put it on a Detroit style crust gives you it's a very buttery crust, and it almost feels like if you were having like a dinner roll at Thanksgiving with this stuff on it.
Mm,
I think that I would have liked more if the cranberry flavor was maybe a little more prominent, because that's a big part of like what makes a Thanksgiving sandwich so good is that the mix of the sweet and savory. But honestly, the flavors coming together, it felt like mostly like just having a Thanksgiving sandwich in pizza form. I'm not sure it's something that I would like get again because I wasn't super in love with it, but I wasn't upset that I tried it either.
okay, yeah, that's a little bit better than what I anticipated because I thought this was going to have like marinara sauce, mixed in with some of the elements
Oh
that
yeah,
you
gross.
expected. So this basically just sounds like I don't know, almost like a casserole or something, like a casserole version of a Thanksgiving sandwich or something like that. But like a handheld version, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to describe what a pizza is at this point. All right. Well, I guess that's as good a place to end as any. That's going to to do it for today's episode of the show. You can find more about a lot of what we talked about at slashfilm.com. I will link to a few things in the show notes. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really helps out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you all next time.